Hello and welcome to the third video in our series on the history of the United States Navy Armed Guard. Episode 3 will explore the preparation and training of the Armed Guard sailors. On December 7th, 1941, the day that will live in infamy, the Imperial Japanese Navy attacks the United States Naval Facility at Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. On that same day, additional Japanese attacks occur at Guam, the Philippines, Hong Kong, Singapore, and Malaya. The United States is now at war with Japan. Hitler soon declares war on the United States. After the attack on Pearl Harbor, patriotism and war fervor gripped the nation. Men volunteering and enlisting for service, and those entering the service via the draft, swelled military ranks. Men who were selected for Navy service were sent to Navy basic training, often referred to as boot camp. In the early 1940s, the training of recruits for the Navy was carried out at 4 widely separated establishments, all of which have been in existence since World War I or before, and consisted of the stations at Newport, Rhode Island, Great Lakes, Chicago, Illinois, Norfolk, Virginia, and San Diego, California. In 1942, 3 additional training stations were established at Bainbridge, Maryland, Sampson, New York, and Farragut, Idaho. New recruits went through the typical rapid Navy indoctrination at boot camp. They discarded all their civilian clothing, boxed it up, and mailed it back home. Haircuts and a battery of inoculations soon followed. A sea bag was also issued to store all his new government-issued items. New sailors were each issued the Blue Jackets Manual. This book contained all the information a new boot or recruit would need to know to become a sailor and handle himself like one. On completion of Navy basic training, sailors were either assigned, volunteered unwillingly, or were tricked into volunteering for armed guard service. One common early war trick or tactic, depending on your point of view, to fill the armed guard ranks was to ask for volunteers who wanted to see immediate action against the enemy, only to find out they were off to the armed guard and not to the fleet to serve on a glamorous battleship, aircraft carrier, or destroyer. Many sailors heard the phrase armed guard and assumed they would be standing around guarding naval installations or ships at a dock. The armed guard was a new term to many new sailors and seasoned Navy veterans. At the completion of naval basic training, i.e. boot camp, sailors assigned to the armed guard were sent to armed guard schools for additional training. There were 3 armed guard schools for most of the war. They were located at Little Creek, later moved to Shelton, Virginia, San Diego, California, and Gulfport, Mississippi. Prior to the establishment of the Gulfport facility in the fall of 1942, training had taken place at the Armed Guard School in Chicago, Illinois. The Chicago school was closed due to winter conditions on the Great Lakes not being suited to year-round training. Let us focus on the Armed Guard schools at Little Creek, Virginia. On the 15th of October, 1941, the Navy Bureau established an Armed Guard school at the section base Little Creek, Virginia. The school had very modest beginnings, with the original staff consisting of 4 retired chief gunnery mates, but the staff expanded rapidly. The first class, consisting of 23 officers and 184 men, reported to the Armed Guard Center just as the Neutrality Act was being repealed in 1941. The new Armed Guard studied many subjects at school, but the primary emphasis was on gunnery and shooting planes and submarines. A vast network of training activities prepared Armed Guard sailors for their duties on armed merchant cargo ships, tankers, or troop transports. On average, the typical time spent at an Armed Guard school was 1 month, packed with activities and training such as the following: small arms training, including pistols and rifles, training on 30 and 50 caliber machine guns, including classroom lectures, their use, maintenance, and live fire exercises, large caliber gunnery and maintenance training, on the 3-inch, 4-inch, and 5-inch guns. A huge advancement in training for the 1940s was the introduction of a new type of gunnery training device, the synthetic trainer. Introduced by the British, the synthetic trainer allowed for all-weather training, typically indoors, and saved valuable ammunition. Some of the synthetic trainers consisted of a portion of a real gun, the anti-aircraft sights, and a mounted film projector. Films were projected onto a screen to simulate attacks, and the gun's trigger and sights were interconnected to record hits or misses on the projected targets via a beam of light. The gunner in training would be graded on his proficiency or lack thereof. In essence, this is one of the very first interactive video games. Classroom lectures on the identification of Allied and Axis aircraft and vessels were conducted. Range and bearing estimating classes were given. Nighttime conditioning and operations training. Gun maintenance and gun repair. Armed Guard sailors were trained in firefighting techniques. Located near each Armed Guard school was an anti-aircraft firing range where Armed Guard sailors were given actual live fire experience against targets. Armed Guard schools were not just educational. Leisure time was observed by the sailors. Organized sports teams were established at the schools, including softball, basketball, bowling, to mention a few. The school at Shelton, Virginia had its own bowling alley and an auditorium for dances, live music, and USO shows. Armed Guard officers were trained at the Armed Guard schools as well. Their training included navigation, first aid, and gunnery. On completion of Armed Guard school, sailors were assigned to one of the 3 Armed Guard centers located in Brooklyn, New York, for Atlantic and Mediterranean-bound ships, New Orleans, Louisiana, for Gulf and South America-bound ships, and Treasure Island in San Francisco, California, for Pacific-bound ships. The Armed Guard centers were the home base for the Armed Guard sailors from their completion of training and arriving at the center until they were assigned to a ship and went out to sea. Upon their return from a sea voyage, leave, or detached service, they would report to the Armed Guard Center. All Armed Guard sailors were attached to a center as long as they remained attached to the Armed Guard service. The Armed Guard centers provided sleeping areas, aka berthing areas, for sleep. For an example, at the Brooklyn Armed Guard Center in New York, on the drill deck of the old armory building called the Jungle, nearly 1,700 men could sleep. The Armed Guard centers fed the sailors at least 3 meals a day, and approximately 5,000 people were fed each day at the Brooklyn Armed Guard Center. The Armed Guard centers were basically a small town that paid the sailors, handled mail, morale, legal services, religious needs, and communications, including a telephone exchange for communications with loved ones back home. The centers also provided additional military training. The centers contained dozens of non-combat service and clerical staff. Women from the Navy Waves performed numerous functions such as instructors for training tasks at the Armed Guard centers. These services freed up men to fight on ships. The Armed Guard centers were able to establish recreational, organized sports teams, including baseball, basketball, football, field and track, and even a swim team. This diversion provided sailors waiting to be assigned to a ship a welcome change of pace, a morale boost, and kept idle sailors from getting into trouble. Other diversions at the Armed Guard centers included the latest movies, live bands, dance, special events. The Naval Reserve Armory at 52nd Street and 1st Avenue in South Brooklyn, New York, was commissioned on the 20th of May, 1941 as a Navy receiving station. It was used to accommodate the crews of British vessels undergoing repairs in local shipyards. On the 18th of November, 1941, the first Armed Guard officers and men arrived from Little Creek, Virginia. This center was to be the main disbursement location for Armed Guard detachments that were to be assigned to ships bound for North Atlantic transits. The center operated around the clock. Calls for a gun crew could come in at any time of the day or night. The story of the Armed Guard Center Atlantic is one of rapid expansion until it became one of the largest military commands in the Navy. No ship ever missed a sailing date for lack of an armed guard crew. The Armed Guard Center at Treasure Island was established on the 19th of December, 1941. It was the intention of the Navy Department that this center should perform the same functions performed by other centers, no more and no less. The Armed Guard Center, located in New Orleans, Louisiana. The Armed Guard Center was commissioned on the 12th of March, 1942. The center would perform the same duties as the Brooklyn and Treasure Island centers. This concludes the third video in our series. Thanks for watching. Please look for my next video. Like this video and share. Hit the subscribe button for my channel. Look for our Facebook group, U.S. Navy Armed Guard WW2, and visit the Armed Guard website at this address. If you are visiting the Baltimore, Maryland area, please plan a visit to the United States Navy National Armed Guard Museum, located on board the Liberty ship, the SS John W. Brown. If you are unable to make it to Baltimore, please consider a donation to Project Liberty ship, SS John W. Brown, at this link.